Welcome back. Let's talk some economic issues now. Nigeria is gradually reaching the 30% inflation mark as various financial advisory services have predicted. Now, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's headline inflation rose for the 10th consecutive month to 27.33%, an 18-year high. Food continues to be the major driver of inflation, as food inflation rose now to 1.52% on a year-on-year basis, with citizens, of course, depending on food imports to meet their national need. Now, food inflation has increased to 30%, according to the MBS. Analysts have attributed the record inflation levels to the removal of petrol subsidy and reforms in the currency markets embarked upon by President Bola Tinubu. Now, the naira has crossed the threshold of 1,000 naira to a dollar in the parallel market, pushing up imported inflation despite the relative stability in global food prices. The situation has prompted the Central Bank of Nigeria to hike interest rate to their highest levels in nearly 2 decades, and there are fears that we might see more hikes in interest rate now in the coming days when the Central Bank of Nigeria holds its Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Back in July now, the Apex Bank increased rates by a record 725 basis points from 11.5% to in early 2022 to its current level of 18.75%. Yet inflation has not budged at all. So what then can be done to control this rising trend? Joining me now to discuss this issue is economic expert Mukhtar Mohammed, and also joining us is Julius Oga, and agro entrepreneur. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. Let me start with you, Mukhtar. You look at what is happening in terms of inflation. Do you, when you say you look at between now and say January, February next year, do you have that fear that we might hit that 30% mark?
Well, I think we're already almost there in the 30% mark. Whether we'll hit it towards the end of first quarter of next year, all depends on a lot of policies or a lot of events that will unfold, especially the exchange rate. Hopefully, if the exchange rate stabilizes, then you could see those numbers coming down. The problem now that we are facing as a nation is because of the exchange rate, and we need to do something fast about it. Otherwise, we might even hit the 30 and above it. So I have an opinion that if we are able to do what we ought to do based on what the government is saying, then definitely we will not hit that inflation of 30%. But if by chance that January and February we are still battling with FX liquidity, FX stability, then we might even exceed that 30% mark.
And my fear is that given what we are seeing now, there's a likelihood that we might still be battling the same problem by early next year. Because you look at oil production, the oil production output has not gone up as significantly as you would expect. And so we might still have to continue to have a challenge with Forex earnings.
Yes, we will. But again, you remember the government is telling us that maybe they will be selling some assets. They're expecting FX inflow from Saudi Arabia. The Minister of Finance have not told us yet if the $10 billion that was supposed to come in some weeks ago is already here. We've seen them do some forward payments, especially to the international banks. And very soon they will be doing that to the local banks also. If they're able to clear up the backlog of the FX debt, especially to Nigerian banks, and then also to the airlines that are in Nigeria, and we might see those numbers coming down. But like you said, if we want to look at what we have on ground, what we have to pay for, then it's not looking good. But when we have to add what we have on ground based on promises or based on what the government is saying they want to do, then we could be a little bit hopeful that before the end of this year, we see stability in the exchange rate.
Now help me to understand this, Mukhtar. You did talk about those forward payments now that the central bank made to some of these banks in the country. Look, when the announcement was made and some of those payments were made, we saw the rates actually come down. We saw the naira picking up. But then just after a day or two, or probably less than a week after, I mean, the rate started going up again. So what exactly is the problem?
Well, people should understand that you are fighting a battle that have to deal with speculators. And see, what is happening to the Naira is that speculators are fighting. And in any market, you need to have the speculators. They are there to make money. They are the ones that make the market interesting, especially in financials market. The speculators are always there, but at long last, if the government is able to do what they ought to do, or whoever, I mean, investors are able to do what the speculators always get their fingers burned. Now, what you saw was that initially, what we had was that the payment will be going on continuously for the next 1 to 2 weeks. But after that first payment, nothing seems to come in again. So then we realized then the banks came out and said only 5% of their payment was made to them, especially the big banks in Nigeria. When we talk about the big banks, talk about the tier one banks. And they've not really gotten those effects back to them. And once they do that, and then you now see that Nigerians are able to accept effects, maybe for school fees, maybe for PTA, then that is when you really be sure that the rate in the parallel market will come down, because at that time, a lot of people that patronize the parallel market will move into the banking space. So for now, that is not happening. That has only happened to foreign banks, and you know that the foreign banks are out there to repatriate their money back to their country of origin. So until we have effects that will be used right here in Nigeria, and that is when most of these tier one banks will be paid. Hopefully, the CBN said they are working on it. They were only giving 5%, and 5%, according to them, is just a drop in an ocean. So hopefully we'll be able to have those payments to these tier one banks, and then activities will pick up in the FX space. Then you will not see, that's when we'll be able to say in clear terms that we are really winning the war with the speculators. But for now, we'll still have those ups and downs. Like in the market, you have days that you are good, the days that you are bad. But on the long run, once your fundamentals is right, there will come a day that it will just always be good, and then there will be stability.
Let me come to you, Julius. Food inflation is the one that actually hits directly. It hits a common man on the street. And that's what a lot of people are worried about. People are actually not looking at the core inflation. But you look at food inflation at 30%, it's really high. And there are fears that this is probably going to get worse. Tell us, I mean, from an agric point of view, what do you think is responsible for this? Why are we not getting, because obviously it appears we're not getting enough food now from our food baskets in this country.
All right. Thank you for having me once again. And like Mr. Mohammed has said, everything is down to the reach of foreign exchange. And added to that, you can see how that is influencing what is happening in our core industrial sector, which is oil production. You can see how the price of petrol and the cost of transportation are impacting food inflation. Food needs to be moved around the country, because sometimes the areas of high consumption are not actually the areas of production. Yeah. Food moves from the north to Lagos, food moves from the north to Calabar, and to Onitsha and all of those places, and we are relying heavily on road transportation. The roads are in a very bad shape, and if you add to that the cost of petroleum products, then you can see the reason why it is not likely that the price of food will come down anytime soon. Families are spending a lot much more on food than ever before. People are spending more money on food than on health, than on education, than on anything else, and people are just struggling to get by, and it's going to be really, really hard. If you add to this all the other challenges we're having with security and the crisis outside of this country, in the Middle East, remember Israel, which is a nation at war right now, is an agricultural it's exporting country. Remember the amount of grains that used to come into Africa from Ukraine and Russia. All of that is affected. It's not. I mean, the inflow of all of those now has been impacted by the crisis in those countries and crisis in other parts of the world. And if you add to that also the impact we're having from climate change, then we're in for hard times. We're really in for hard times.
And let's talk about this issue of climate change, especially when you consider the warning issued by NIMET not quite long ago that quite a number of states are still going to get flooded. We've had a huge amount of rainfall this year, and we've been told that we should expect flooding. And most of the states that are usually impacted are these states that you would call the food belts of this country. So just how bad you look at, especially when you look at this issue of flooding now, how bad can things get in terms of food, food scarcity, especially when we begin to talk about food security in this country?
Yeah, it could really depend on the impact of the flood. And what we're talking about is you have an asset, you've invested in an asset you're looking forward to making profit from, and then you lose that investment. That is what happens when farms are lost during floods. So, and you just already, you just made the allusion to all of the flood belts being in the agro-producing areas. So when you have farms inundated, whether they be from small-scale farmers or large-scale farmers, and a lot of the time, the small-scale farmers are even more impacted by floods. And they are at the core of the production. The little that is gotten from all of them is what accumulates into the huge quantity that, feeds the nation. And when their small farm holdings are washed away, then, of course, there's nothing to fall back on. Then that is an impact on the entire country,
Now, when you look at the food inflation items now, rice, for instance, is one of the items that the MBS mentioned. The price of rice is going up. It's actually gone up. Let me even ask you this, because it's something most Nigerians can understand. Most Nigerians can understand why local rice is so expensive. I mean, going for, in most cases, over 50,000 naira per bag. Everyone had thought local rice, for instance, was going to be cheaper than foreign rice. With the coming in of local rice, the price of rice was going to just crash all across board. But we're not seeing that happen. Local rice is expensive. It's something Nigerians just don't understand. Could you help us to understand why, for instance, these farmers and local producers just have to sell their rice at this high cost we're seeing?
All right, I will agree with you that the expectation was that local production is going to actually help to crash prices, but then the expectation is different from the reality, and we are where we are because we hadn't sufficiently, developed our own capacity to produce to the extent that we can saturate the market and fulfill our own local demand. So we haven't been able to do that, and that keeps the price up there. And if you add to that the cost of agricultural inputs, some of the crises we're experiencing, flooding, climate change, insecurity, and all of that, in addition to the huge population we have, you would see that it's not just going to be that easy for price of local rice to come down. Now, the price is even cheaper. The first is coming from places where there is mass production, mechanized farming, and where they have, sufficient enough, and they actually make it. It's actually a foreign exchange commodity, and rice is produced in huge quantities in Thailand, in Indonesia, in China, with the intention to export. So with that, you could have prices crash, and because they are trying to force their way into our markets, they will sell at lower rates than the local producer. And then the local producer is facing these challenges of competition. Is also facing a shortage of inputs. Is having to basically to claw the earth with his bare hands to produce to meet the demand. The importation was stopped abruptly. So there was a vacuum that the local producers could not immediately fill. So, and once they couldn't fill that vacuum, you won't expect prices to drop. So I think these are some of the challenges we are facing. Yes, and the reversal of the policy, the opening of the borders to allow in the importation of rice, I think would have solved a problem in some sense. In another sense, it's creating a problem because what we struggled to get our feet to see if we could produce and eat our own rice. And once the cheaper foreign rice comes in, it becomes a disincentive for the local farmer. And we're going to, in the long run, fall back to a situation whereby we now have to people might just give up. That okay, if the rice that is coming in from Thailand is cheaper, and the rice that is produced in Nigeria, which may be of higher nutritional value but of low quality because of processing defaults and all of that is there. And then it becomes a disincentive because the local farmer and seller are going to lose the ground.
Yes, I get your point. I get your
point.
Thank
you very much.
But let's just quickly take a short break now. But when we come back, Mukhtar, I just want to get your view now on what you expect in the coming Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Because I mean, with inflation going up, what response do we expect to see from the CBN? So we'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.
Welcome back. And if you've just joined us, we're discussing Nigeria's persistent inflation and what can actually be done to tame it. And on the program, I have Mukhtar Mohammed, who is an economist, and Julius Oga, who is an agro entrepreneur. Mukhtar, thank you very much for continuing to stay with us. Now, the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee will be meeting soon to decide and to take action, especially on the issue of this rising inflation rate. Under Governor Emefiele, we saw the response. The response was consistent. Each time there was a hike in inflation rate, the CBN had always raised lending rates now. And some people have said, look, that is actually the traditional method of tackling rising interest rate now by central banks across the world. Do you expect that this new central bank management now will continue to toe that line, especially now that we're seeing inflation near that 30% mark?
Well, if you go by what their body language yesterday, I mean, during the week where they said that when the MPS released the inflation numbers, they said, oh, a hike that they've been doing since is beginning to see impact. And I asked myself, maybe that impact is being felt that they expect it to be higher than where it is. So definitely, if they say some things like that, then you expect that they will hike the rate. Now, this is the challenge, like Mr. Julius have just said. We have a peculiar situation here in Nigeria. What do you see the Central Bank of Nigeria do? What you just said, like the traditional way of just hiking rate, and then cost of funding will go up. Small businesses will not be able to borrow. Where they are borrowed, they are not struggling to pay. So what we expect the CBN to be doing is to look at your own issues and begin to tackle it. Mr. Julius said something. Nigerian inflationary pressure is caused by cost of production induced. That one thing that's causing inflationary pressure. Microeconomic policies, that is also causing inflationary pressure, and also supply chain. Now, when we talk about supply chain in Nigeria, you're looking at most of this agro industry, or most of, like you talked about transportation, they use PMS or diesel. For the companies, they use diesel, and the cost of all these products have gone up. And so if you look now, if what we've been doing traditionally is what we see the US do, we see the UK do. But now look at the UK and the US, you see that their inflationary pressure has come down because what they are doing is that they are looking at what is really causing inflation, which is their own was a disruption. And that disruption has to come, started all the way from COVID-19. Now, our own has to do with cost-induced inflation, macroeconomic induced inflation, demand and supply induced inflation, and now we added to it FX induced inflation. So how do you address those issues? Now, you can't be addressing those issues by hiking rate. You should be addressing those issues by trying to see how you can help these small businesses to grow, how you can intervene, not the way they've been intervening before, or maybe intervene through structural interventions. So definitely, I don't think rising rate is the main thing to do. But again, in Nigeria, what we've seen in the CBN is copy and paste. So what I expect the CBN to do in their multi-policy committee meeting, tell us how you are going to address the FX volatility. If you are able to address that, you have addressed almost 80% of the inflationary pressures are happening in Nigeria today.
And honestly, that is a very big issue. The FX volatility is really a problem, and it's something that everybody is hoping that a final solution is that the CBN comes up with a final solution. But it's not looking like we're getting a very good grasp now on the situation. But finally now, Julius, let me ask you. What do you expect to see happen for food inflation to begin to go down?
That's a question that I would want to even ask the Minister of Agriculture myself. What is he doing for food inflation? I mean, for the cost of rice.
The reason I asked you this question is because not quite long ago, the federal government declared emergency on food. I mean, we're all aware of that. When the government said it was releasing thousands of tons of grains from the National Reserve, that it was going to support farmers. It rolled out a series of initiatives. But unfortunately, we are not seeing the impact because food inflation has continued to go up.
Exactly. Before you should even have an emergency situation before you even think of releasing grains from the national reserves. And so if it is like this at normal times, I don't know what else to expect. And the level at which that policy pronouncement was made and the expectation it generated in the minds of Nigeria, the optimism has all crashed, because several months later, we are still where we are, or in fact, we're even in a worse place. There just has to be deliberate policies bringing back the marketing boards and all of that. We have not seen. You see, agriculture is a sector that is practical. It's not bureaucratic. So if we're not seeing the level of intense activity that would generate, bring down the cost of transportation, generate agricultural activity, even at the subsistence level, not to talk of at the commercial level. We've not seen all of those, and we've continued to see the food belt production areas in this country remaining the hub of crisis. So with those crises, with all these factors coming in together, you can only hope. We can only hope that something happens and the prices maybe stabilize. But coming down rapidly is going to take some time. And I think that's what the government really needs to, because people are getting more angry because they are hungry.
Mukhtar, I'll let you have the final word. What kind of Christmas should Nigerians be expecting this year?
And for the past years, we've been doing pretty Christmas. The government have been telling us to tie our belts while they drive on SUV cars. So what style of Christmas are we expecting? Maybe we will not still have the rice, which is the natural thing going from house to house. Remember that the government have promised us about 150 bags of rice for a state of Lagos that have over 2 million. So hopefully those rice will come in derricks, so it will go around for Nigerians. Outside of that, I think it will be difficult for us to even see rice to eat. Now, I think it's not looking good, especially now that the government that have come up with so much hope initially when they came in, telling us the policy statement, and all of a sudden, the finance minister is telling us, I'm not a magician. The CBN governor is telling us it will take time. I'm not a magician.
But in fairness, don't you think these policies will take time? Because these policies were just rolled out, not quite long ago. This government has been in power now since, I would say effectively since June.
You see, when you want to see a policy, when you come out, you should confidently talk about your policy. You shouldn't be making us feel because we are putting so much pressure, we are telling us to tie our bed, the policy is going to be tough. We need you to tell us more about the policy, what to expect. And when you are telling us about the policy, you are telling us about key areas that we will start seeing results. It's all about results. It's all about results. So it's not about whether the policy, we need to see this. When you are coming up with policy, there's a near-term goal, there's a medium-term goal, and there's a long-term goal. So what is the near-term goal of removal of subsidy? What is the near-term goal of floating of the currency? What is the short-term gain in this? And what will be the future gain in the long term of this? These are what Nigerians need to know, not you coming out to say, you know what, we are going to continue to go through those policies. That means you yourself, you are not even sure that those policies will come out with a desired result. You need to tell us
very quickly now.
Those policies
sorry to interject. Very quickly, because we just have to wrap up. How important are these investments we expect from Saudi Arabia?
See, when we go by what the government say, look, the only time I'll take a government serious is if Mr. President was sitting beside, and Mr. President and the Prince, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia were sitting together, and the Crown Prince say, look, we are going to be bringing this money to Nigeria. And then I'll become. Remember what happened in UAE, in Dubai, where they told us, the special advisor, the presidential spokesman told us that immediately, and after that, up to this moment, we've not seen. So if I look at that, about what the government is saying, I'm not too optimistic.
Yes,
I'm not too optimistic.
And
because
I very much can understand you. I very much can understand you. But if it happens, all well and good, because it will make a whole world of difference. I'm very happy that you made allusion to. I'm very happy that you made allusion to the UAE, because the government said it, and up till now nothing has happened. The visa ban has still not been lifted. Nothing has happened, so to speak. We're still watching. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming on the program and for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's how much we can take on the program this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.